There's one food that you should avoid if you're over 60 years old, okay? Because it can spike your blood pressure and your blood sugar. And of course, if you have diabetes, you definitely want to avoid this. But even if you don't have diabetes, you still want to be aware of this. So let's talk about the one food that you should avoid if you are over 60. And also I am going to give you some recommendations on what you should eat instead. So if you're ready for this information, let's dive right in. The number one food that you need to avoid is dairy. Now, dairy can be in many different things. So let's talk about some of the items with dairy that you really need to avoid. The number one item that has dairy that you need to start avoiding is ice cream. Ice cream has a lot of sugar, okay? It has a lot of fat, and it also has a lot of dairy. And when we consume ice cream, our body starts breaking down that lactose, which is the milk sugar. And this creates an increase in the gut. So what happens is you get bloating, gas, and then you have all these other issues. You might even feel dizzy because of the increase in the gut. It can actually change your blood pressure like that just from eating ice cream. But if you're over 60, especially if you're over 70, it can cause an increase in your blood pressure and blood sugar that is very hard to control. Now, I'm not saying to never have ice cream, but you want to have it in moderation. You really need to limit how much ice cream you're having. A lot of people just don't realize how much dairy they're actually consuming. Even things like yogurt, for example. Yogurt has dairy. Anything that has milk has dairy. And so you really need to start paying attention to dairy, especially as you age. As we age, we start losing our ability to digest that lactose, that milk sugar. And so it becomes more difficult. And what happens is the bacteria in our gut, it starts to feed on that undigested lactose and it produces gas and it produces bloating. And a lot of times people will feel this and they'll feel dizzy. They'll feel weak after consuming dairy. And if you're already over 60, you really need to limit or eliminate dairy out of your diet. Another thing that has dairy is cheese. Cheese has a lot of fat. It has a lot of protein. It has a lot of calcium. But again, as we age, we tend to lose our ability to digest the protein and the fats in cheese. And so what happens is we start getting this indigestion, heartburn, acid reflux. And a lot of times people think that that's just normal as they age. No, it's not normal. There's a reason why you're getting that heartburn, that acid reflux, and it could be because of the cheese. Maybe it's not the only thing, but maybe you're having too much cheese. And so if you're over 60, you really need to limit your cheese. There's some cheeses that have less lactose than other cheeses. So for example, cheddar cheese has less lactose than mozzarella cheese. And so if you're gonna have cheese, have something like cheddar cheese. But again, you want to be very careful because too much protein and too much fat in cheese can create a lot of digestive issues. And the next thing you want to watch out for is butter. Butter has a lot of fat. And as we age, we tend to have less hydrochloric acid in our stomach. And so when we consume that fat, it doesn't get digested. It doesn't get broken down, and so what ends up happening is you end up having all this rancid fat stuck in your stomach and you are gonna feel bloated. You're gonna feel dizzy. You might even have some pain in the upper abdomen. And so butter is another thing that you really need to start limiting. If you use a lot of butter, you need to start decreasing the amount of butter that you're using. And if you're over 60, I would recommend that you totally eliminate butter out of your diet. Now, let me give you an alternative. If you love the taste of butter, okay, you can get some organic grass-fed tallow. And what you can do is you can melt that tallow and use that on your vegetables, or you can use that on your salads. That's a great substitute for butter. So if you're missing the taste of butter, you can get this organic grass-fed tallow and use that. And also you can use extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is a great oil to cook with. It's a great oil to put on your salads. It's a great oil to dip your bread in. So you can use extra virgin olive oil as a substitute for butter and it's healthier. Another thing that has dairy that you need to watch out for is ice milk. Okay? Ice milk is in a lot of desserts. You have things like Italian ice. You have frozen yogurt. All of these things have dairy. And so you really need to start paying attention to how much dairy you're having. When you go out to eat, you really need to start asking questions about the ingredients in that meal that you're ordering. Because a lot of restaurants, they don't put the ingredients on the menu. And so you really need to ask them. Ask them if they use dairy. Ask them if they use gluten. Start educating yourself on what you should be eating. And also make sure that you're not ordering things that you shouldn't be having. So if you're over 60, you really need to start paying attention to dairy. Dairy can be hidden in a lot of foods, so you need to really read the labels and look at the ingredients. But if you have high blood pressure, if you have high blood sugar, if you're pre-diabetic, type 1, type 2, you need to start eliminating dairy. It's not something that you need to get rid of completely. But if you're over 60, I would recommend that you cut down at least 50% of the dairy that you are currently consuming and slowly reduce that dairy until you get to a point where you are only having it once a week, maybe twice a week, but not more than that. The next thing that you need to pay attention to is soy sauce. Soy sauce has a lot of sodium, it has a lot of sugar, and again, too much soy sauce can spike your blood pressure and your blood sugar. So if you're over 60, you need to start limiting soy sauce. Now, I like soy sauce. I have soy sauce occasionally, but I'm very careful how much I use because it does have a lot of sodium. It can raise my blood pressure if I have too much of it. So if you're over 60, just be careful with soy sauce. Don't have too much soy sauce. Alright. The next thing that you need to avoid is foods high in oxalates. Okay, what are foods high in oxalates? Spinach, beets, nuts, chocolate, tea. All of these things are high in oxalates. Oxalates can bind to calcium and create kidney stones. And so if you're over 60, you need to be careful with oxalates. Now, if you have a history of kidney stones, I would recommend that you totally eliminate spinach, okay, and beet greens out of your diet. Some people can't tolerate spinach and they don't know it. They have no symptoms when they have spinach. But if they do a little elimination diet, they'll find out that spinach is the culprit for their kidney stones. Nuts are another big problem, especially if you have a tendency to make kidney stones. So if you're over 60 and you're making kidney stones, I would recommend that you eliminate nuts completely. Tea? You want to be very careful with tea, especially if you have kidney stones. If you have a history of kidney stones, you need to avoid tea completely. And the last thing that you need to avoid is sugar. Sugar is in everything. And if you're over 60, sugar can raise your blood pressure, it can raise your blood sugar, and it can create inflammation throughout your entire body. And so if you have arthritis, if you have joint pain, sugar can be the culprit. And so if you're over 60, I would recommend that you stay away from sugar. Stay away from any processed foods. In my next video, I am going to talk about 5 foods that you should be having if you are over 60. These 5 foods are anti-inflammatory. They're going to help you heal. They're going to help you regenerate. They're going to help you live longer. And they're going to help you prevent disease. So if you haven't seen my video on the 5 best foods for over 60, you'll see it right here. Just click on this link, and I'll see you in the next video.